Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Mark Adams and the Red Raiders are in Lawrence, Kansas, looking for that one time, like they're racing Kevin O'Shea down Cherry Hill. And in Lubbock, questions about a Joey McGuire body double, holograms, or a twin brother. An investigation next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Always appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts each weekday. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and kicking the doors open today, Chris, as we've got quite the hill to climb. Red Raider hoops on the road once again. You have won 2 straight away from your building. But the building you're going to be playing in tonight is not going to resemble the one you visited in Norman, Oklahoma. It's a top 3 Kansas team awaiting you, senior night, yada, yada, yada. You've been there before, Chris. You know what that challenge is like. And, man, for a team whose back is truly against the wall now, having to pull off the improbable, what a place to be tasked with such a thing as you travel to take on Bill Self and the Jayhawks.
Yeah, nationally televised on ESPN. This is maybe the toughest place to play in college basketball just because of the environment, but also you match that with Kansas just rarely loses in this building. And, and there's probably 2 schools of thought on the way to look at the game tonight. There's a lot of pressure on both teams for completely different reasons. And I think you have all the pressure of really your season being on the line. And I'm curious to see if the team plays like it still is, or if if they give in a bit just because it's like, okay, we had our shot. You just don't know what you're going to get with a kind of a young team. And then because we talked about that in yesterday's show. A win tonight, and you're right back where you wanted to be. I mean, just like that again. But pulling it off is the tough part. In an opposing arena that they just don't lose much. You've only won once in your history. And because there was a time when I thought you're never going to win here. But even the Final Four team went up there and lost by 16 points. It was the Elite 8 team that went up there and handled the business. Kansas, though, has a lot of pressure just because they do have a 1-game lead in the conference standings, but they cannot give anything back because they play in Austin this weekend. And that is a game that if Kansas were to win it, they'll win the conference title outright. And Kansas, at worst could tie for the league. But if they lose tonight, then it's a winner-take-all scenario, I think, over the weekend in Austin, and the winner would win the league. So again, different pressures for both teams, and I guess I think I even mentioned that too. If I'm Mark, I may just try to play the pressures on them card, man. Go out and have fun and let it fly. We'll just see what happens. We're gonna have to play really well, and the way you have to beat Kansas in that building, only way I've ever seen it done, is you have to play really well from start to finish and kind of be in control. Because if you play a back and forth game and Kansas has a chance to win it, they almost always do at the end. But when you control the game and you kind of play it at your pace and with a kind of a lead, that's when Kansas loses if they can't ever just get over the hump. And you have to use your timeouts. Because a made 3 or one of those dunks that they're famous, one of those lob plays that they run, that gets that place jumping. And I just don't have any concept of how this young team that's never been in this environment will handle it. I mean, Davion Harmon has been in here and Kevin O'Banner, but I don't think anybody else has. So it's tough. I mean, it really is. But you don't have to play perfect. But you do have to play really well, and you better shoot it well. That's the key. You can't go in there and just be ice cold, or Kansas. They're going to play at arm's length, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, about by the final 5 minutes in the ball game, you won about a 15-point lead.
Well,
because you don't want to be anywhere near the Zebras
Mhm.
having anything to do down the stretch with it. If you're a 6-point underdog, you're -4 against Kansas. I'm sorry, +4 against Kansas, +2 against the officials if you're playing in Lawrence. So you don't want to be anywhere near a tight game in the final few seconds. Right? Easier said than done, Chris. But you're right, giving me that memory. And I think I may have had that confused. Was it the Final Four or the Elite Eight team that went and actually smacked Kansas around? That Elite Eight team. I don't know if I'd have got that right if
Yeah, it was
someone hit me with that on the street.
Elite Eight team did it, and they controlled the game from tip to tip. And I mean,
Yes.
I never thought I would see that day, but you're kind of having a layup drill, and you're hanging off the rim doing your dunks and things like that at the end of the game, and there's people
Crazy.
leaving. There's people leaving that building early, and you just kind of pinch yourself because I mean I've been there when you just really haven't had a chance. And you've
Yeah.
taken some good teams up there. Like I said, that Final Four team, went up there and lost by 16 points, I guess it was. And last year's team played it to the bone. I mean, you could make the argument that you should have won this game, and Bryson Williams went for 30 plus. It gets into overtime. And I think I've told you that at some points in one of these shows that I've never seen a team earn more respect off of a loss than nationally, I should say, than what Texas Tech's team did last year when they went into Lawrence and lost in overtime. And it was really not that Kansas survived that game. It was Texas Tech is a wagon. They are going to be a handful. They are going to be difficult throughout. And it was fairly early, I think, in the conference, schedule. And sure enough, I think most people were right. But you got a ton of respect and street cred off of your performance, even in a losing effort. But it's just there's so many things you have to do when you play these guys. And again, this is not a perfect Kansas team. I mean,
Well, I
Grady.
wanted to ask you about this, Chris. You mentioned yesterday on yesterday's episode, like a really good Kansas team, but I think you said something like they're not a Kansas juggernaut that maybe we had
Right.
seen previously. So where does that separation kind of begin? What do they maybe not have that you have seen in some of those other really well-oiled machines?
Yeah, they don't have a bunch of bona fide NBA guys. Now, Grady Dick is a one and done. He's a lottery guy. Jalen Wilson is going to get an opportunity to play in the NBA. And then typically they almost always have one of the best post players in the Big 12. They kind of have this
Yeah.
hybrid big guy in KJ Adams this year that's an undersized guy. And so because usually Kansas has the McDonald's All-American David McCormick, or I'm trying to remember some of the guys that they've had before that that are just you just have a hard time dealing with their size, and that's just not really the way that this particular Kansas team is built. They are long and athletic. Kevin McCullough, a big part of that defensively. I think the guy that makes me the most nervous, it's not even Jalen Wilson. It's DeJuan Harris. He's their point guard. And here's a stat for you. Whenever he scores in double figures, they're undefeated. I think they're like 21-0 when he scores in double figures. And he's kind of a playmaker, facilitator, on the ball defender more so than he is a scorer. But playing into that stat, we'll go back to January the 3rd, I guess it was, whenever you first saw this team.
But first, today's episode brought to you by Built Bar. You're looking for a delicious treat, but you're not looking for all the fat, all the calories. I got what you need. It's Built Bar. What makes them so good? For starters, covered in 100% real chocolate. You got it. Real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, or coconut almond. Not sure how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better, they're good for you. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Even better now, not only can you get them at BuiltBar.com, but you can get them at your nearest Walmart, your nearest Sam's Club. Get there today and get in on something that tastes great and is great for you. You can thank me later after you've tried your first Built Bar.
Playing into that stat, we'll go back to January the 3rd, I guess it was, whenever you first saw this team. The guy went for 18. It was a career high, and most of those were from deep. He made 5 threes on you, and I looked it up just to be sure. He made 5 threes on you this day. He's only made 25 all season. So 20% of what he's made was in one game versus you in Lubbock. I mean, and he's the guy that just makes you the most nervous because he's a really good point guard. He doesn't screw a lot of stuff up. Whenever Kansas had their 3-game losing streak there a month ago or 3 or 4 weeks ago, he was kind of the player that was struggling. So what it all tells you is they kind of go as he goes. If he plays well, they're really difficult to beat. If he doesn't play well, you have a chance. In that first matchup, you look at the battle of the 2 point guards. Davion Harmon was a non-factor in this game. Played maybe one of his worst games in his Tech season, and that includes all the ones we've seen recently. But even up to that point, he was 1 of 5 from the field. I think he had 4 points. He wasn't even in there at the end of the game. I think they subbed him out for Lamar Washington and had Pop Isaacs in there just because it just wasn't. I think the length and the way that Kansas played defense really bothered Davion. He just didn't quite figure it out that day. So that head-to-head matchup right there goes a long way in deciding what goes on tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up that game. I wanted to ask you about the last time around because it was another one of those very close but yet very far away results as you fall 75-72 there in early January. And Harris was the guy I remember talking with you after that game about, because there were so many times that Tech would just be, sacrificing everything to get a stop or to get a bucket, maybe start to put together a little run. It seemed like you had to claw and fight and bite and all that just to get any forward momentum. And then all of a sudden, kick it out to Harris. 3 ball from deep, 5 for 5 at the end of the day. And there were so many of those little moments where I just felt like he just kind of stemmed the Red Raider tide. And he had some help with that also. But, yeah, perfect from beyond the arc that day, 5 for 5. And led Kansas with 18 points. I'm curious about some of the other things that you remember from that game, Chris. Davion Harmon was obviously a big storyline, I guess. You've already described the non-impact that he had that day. But if you're on the other end of that spectrum, big-time impact. Kevin O'Banner had one of his best individual days of the season, went for 26 and 7. Knocked down 4 3-pointers, 6 for 7 from the free throw line. Statistically, there may be another that competes with that, but in my mind, I think that may have been his best individual day of the year.
Yeah, especially when you consider the opponent. He was really good that day. He was the star that you needed him to be. I think that he did struggle just a bit leading up to that, but I think you needed your best player to play his best. I think he did. You just didn't quite have enough around him. But those are the games that Kansas typically wins throughout a league race. This is why they win the league title. They don't lose those close ones more often than not. And we can get into how that played out in Lubbock, because I didn't agree with some of what was done from an official standpoint at the end. And then, Bacho ended up getting hurt. But the one component, Casey, that now changes like it has in these second matchups is Fardaws will obviously play. And I don't know, again, he helps you slow the game down. He can score in the half court because Kansas is so good. Unfortunately, they're a lot like TCU. They're so good at getting the ball up the floor, and they share it so well, it gives teams problems. And this is what the Red Raiders just got crushed with against TCU, is just really good guards that make good decisions and put pressure on you in transition. And Kansas does it. They've been doing it for years. Even Roy Williams was the coach before Bill Self. They just get the ball out of the net, or they inbound it, or they get a rebound, and it's like pass, and then they're in position to really put it, to score it. And so that just puts a lot of pressure on you if you're not paying attention to what you're supposed to be doing, and if you're supposed to go crash, if you're supposed to get back or whatever. That's kind of I'll be interested to see kind of how Mark handles that part, because Kansas is elite at it, especially so at home. But I'll be interested to see how Fardaws plays, because again, if KJ Adams gets in a bit of foul trouble, maybe you catch a break there. I don't know if he has a hard time guarding Fardaws, because he's got a size advantage. KJ Adams is he's a former lacrosse player from Austin, Texas. And that's how athletic he is. He was a terror apparently on the lacrosse field. Not that I've watched a ton of lacrosse, but I've seen enough and read enough about KJ Adams, but that's who you're dealing with there. But, and Jalen Wilson is the guy averaging about 20 a game. And he's the one that he didn't really play that great against you. And Lubbock only had, I think, 14 points, but he's averaging nearly 20 a game. And if he's going crazy, it could be a long night too. So they just seemingly have a little bit of everything. But I say that they're not the juggernaut that I'm used to because they're not that much more talented than everybody. They don't have a lot of weaknesses at all. They're really good on either side of the floor. They've got enough depth and size and some experience and can play kind of multiple different styles, however you want to play it. And they're just well coached. It pains me to always say that about Bill Self, but he's a really, really good basketball coach, and he does his team lots of favors every game.
Which proves that a man that wears a toupee still can serve a purpose. So championing that community is Bill Self, and you like to see it, I guess. Chris, is it just me, or has some sheen come off of the impenetrability, which may be a word, or maybe one I just made up, fact check me on that, of basketball at Allen Fieldhouse? Like, it used to be you have a 0.0001% chance, and now maybe it's just 0.01. I'm not saying it's like easy to go there, but I don't know if it's the Big 12 becoming so good, or I feel like I've seen more tight games. I feel like I've seen Kansas beat on their floor more often in the last few years. And again, I'm not saying it's like a frequent thing, but compared to what it has been throughout the history of the Big 12 Conference, am I crazy, or has there been a little bit of a chink in the home court armor there for Kansas in some recent seasons?
Very fair. And I think part of it is how good the Big 12 is, one, and two, just parity in college basketball in general. I think, you're not taking – now, Mark Adams' team is going to be the exception, but more often than not, you're not taking really young teams in there, that just can't, just are overwhelmed. But Kansas has felt the NBA draft a bit and trying to replace. I mean, they've dabbled in the portal. Obviously, Kevin McCullough being there, and they've started to add some of that into their team, so they don't just have these teams that are stacked year in and year out, and they just reload them as they lose them to either the draft or graduation. But I think it's everybody else is kind of caught up. I mean, their margin. Again, I just say this isn't one of they are compared to everybody this year. And again, they deserve a world of credit if they end up winning this league, share it, win it, whatever, because of how good the Big 12 is. But they're not as good as other Kansas teams I've seen. And I again, this is a team that won the national championship last year. But they've had to figure out some things as the season has gone along. I mean, this is a team that lost 3 in a row, which again, for an overall number 1 seed type conversation in a Big 12 champion, you would have thought there's nobody that was going to survive losing 3 in a row in this league and still win it. And they may be about to do it. But they don't, I guess they don't have as much margin for error as they have in years past. And I do think people have come in and played them tougher and played them better. And you just can't let it come down to officiating at the end. It happens all the time. Officials get sucked into that environment. It's well documented, but that's why you try to avoid it. And you play them at arm's length if you can. Easier said than done, though.
It's the Leslie Nielsen syndrome. Everybody wants to go with the home crowd. There was a call Saturday at United Supermarkets Arena after they made it. I told my wife, and they made it in favor of the Red Raiders. Told my wife, that guy had no idea what he was going to call when he blew that whistle. Had no idea what he was. It was like something, out of bounds on the baseline or some quick play. And I thought he has no idea other than I'm going with the home crowd, baby. Let's get a little cheer here instead of a few of those boos. Chris, before we move away I from this topic, I really you were touching on the way that Kansas shares the basketball. And I don't know how their roster compares from a returner standpoint or a veteran standpoint to say Texas Christians, but a very perceptive Locked On Texas Tech viewer commented in the YouTube comments regarding the Texas Christian game about how much basketball those guys have played together. I think he said they have 5 returning starters. I don't know if that number is exactly right, but either way, the point still stands. And maybe that's kind of why we were seeing, some of the great chemistry and synergy there on the offensive end of the floor or otherwise. Maybe we're seeing that same benefit for Kansas. Maybe we're not seeing that once again for a team like Texas Tech that has so many pieces. You're plugging and playing year to year. There could be a world of other problems. I don't know what's the limiting factor, but it's been on your mind, I think, if you're a Tech basketball fan through the end of the Beard era into Mark Adams' tenure. as you've had such turnover from offseason to offseason. And sometimes you made it look really good. You probably made it look a lot easier than it should have been. But this season is obviously an exception, and it's kind of hard to replace, I guess, just some time spent together, getting the feel for one another as a team at the end of the day.
I think TCU's entire team from last year is back, with the exception of, I think they lost a player that transferred to Creighton, I believe, and then they added an Oklahoma State transfer to replace him. And other than that, it's all the same pieces. And again, as we've talked about, they were one kind of bad call or one shot from falling from being in the Sweet 16 right there where the Red Raiders were last year.
Right.
And if not for some Mike Miles injuries and some Damian Ball suspension early on in their season, maybe the record would be a bit different. But Kansas, they lost some guys to the draft. Christian Brown, they lost Abaji, and they graduated a few guys as well. But it's just a credit to Bill Self, and it's a credit to like program type guys like Jalen Wilson that has been in the program, and it's like he's taken this next step, and then even another next step as he's kind of gotten older. And, now he's averaging 20 a game. He's going to be a first-team All-Big 12 guy. And then they go get a guy like Grady Dick, who's, a one-and-done lottery pick type guy who's just been phenomenal. Reminds me of a Chandler Parsons, Kyle Korver type player, just deep range, smart, not great on defense, but just a typical kind of Kansas-looking type player. But, yeah, he'll only be there for 1 year. And we'll see if Kansas can replace all these guys, for next year, but that's, that'll be Bill Self's problem in the offseason.
I want to be a Corver, not a Parsons. Good grief, man. Chandler or a ski mask to collect his NBA paychecks did Chandler Parsons, I think, but maybe Corver, the comparison, a depth there. I just, I don't know, Chris, look, when you have a bad season and Texas Tech is on their way to not meeting expectations, clearly, unless they really pull something off, and it's still not quite meeting the expectation of what you want to be from a regular season team. Everything is up for questioning when you have this kind of season, obviously. On the floor, on the sideline, the guys in jerseys, the guys in suits. They don't wear suits anymore, pullovers or whatever. But I think there is some point in the year, like you just said a moment ago, okay, well, Kansas has lost this, but here's a credit to Bill Self and the coaching staff to get them to play together in this way. There's a certain point in the year also where you look at a team like Tech, or at least I do, and I'm thinking, all right, well, there's some pieces here, obviously that can be impactful and productive if they're not coming together. And I know some of that progress has to be delayed because of injury and time you just haven't spent together. But that is where I think sometimes you look at those guys on the coaching staff and you're thinking, all right, well, what didn't click to bring guys together? Because not everybody not everybody that plays well together has returned the whole team. That's not like the only way to play well together, bring everybody back. So at some point, I think you do kind of look over there on the sideline. You're like, all right, well, what was it that wasn't clicking to establish some chemistry? And that may be unfair because the injury timeline just is looming large. I mean, you have to say that, Chris, but obviously something hasn't clicked to really get Texas Tech consistently to play together. I mean, I think you see some of these days that are just far too disjointed for as late in the year as we are.
Yeah, and I'm just a firm believer that you've gotten in so many of these close games and haven't been able to win them, that experience wins those more often than not. Experience wins. I just think you're better in the last 5 minutes with older guys. I don't know any other way to say it. Guys that have been through it and understand, okay, I don't need this right now, or let's do this, or I just think that your older guys are typically better. And I think it's a great point. You said this a while ago, something along the lines of, they don't have that many guys back and then they've made it work. And that's why I think if you're Mark and the bulk of your freshmen, if they don't end up coming back, that I think you have to look at, was it wise to have this many freshmen in this kind of era of the portal transfer stuff going on when everybody is so old across the league? Because you took a lot of lumps this year and you hope there's a payoff, but if some of them leave, then you wonder, okay, maybe let's not do that anymore. Let's have a different philosophy there. Cause I still maintain with this particular team, you could have done what they wanted to do because it's not the freshman's fault. To me,
No.
Where you missed and where it's hurt you the most is if you'd have had one of the two of your actual transfers in Kerwin Walton or Demarion Williams, if you'd had one of the two of those guys really hit and like be a factor for you, I think it changes this team's outlook completely. If one of those guys, and it would have been nice if both of them could have, but if one of them could have really been a key for you, and they just haven't been. I'm just being honest. They're good kids. I don't think they've caused any problems at all, or anything like that. Sorry, I'm talking with my hands. I just ripped my headphones out. They haven't caused any problems at all, and it's not their fault. I'm just saying, but that you've needed more from one or both of those guys. They haven't been able to give it to you, and that's where I have the most. Not issue, but just that's where you kind of missed in putting this team together. Because man, if one of those guys was averaging, 8 and 6 or something, just somewhere, in the sweet spot, they don't have to be your leading scorer, but just another key guy that you could have counted on consistently that could have added some oomph to you. I think you would have been in really good shape. But that's just not what you got.
I'm almost saying the only dude that has really come along, with all due respect to Lamar Washington also, is the dude that should be in high school in Canada. Elijah Fisher, has been the dude as the season went on that's kind of given you not huge explosive minutes, but more consistently productive minutes, whereas other times you just got total disappearing acts. I'm not even going to revisit the Kerwin Walton turnover on Saturday because if I don't have anything nice to say, I shouldn't say anything nice at all. So it's a good time to just move on with the program.
All right, when they're but I agree with you about Elijah Fisher, man. I do. I think you nailed it. I think that he's only playing what? Let's go 8 to 12 minutes a game, maybe.
Yeah.
I just think when he's in there now, again, if you played him more, maybe he gets exposed a bit. But with what you're asking from him, it's pretty productive, and I think you can build off of it. He's a guy that I can go. I've changed my mind on in the last month. I'm like, he's a guy at some points looked completely overwhelmed and like I just don't know if he's ready for this. But now you look at it, and be like, "Boy, I'd kind of like to hold on to him and see how much better we can get." And I'll tell you, part of it is I love his demeanor. He just seems pretty steady. He's really good on defense. He got subbed into the game against TCU at the very end as a defensive substitute. That should tell you all you need to know about what Mark Adams thinks about, his outlook and where he's at right now for him to be at the end of the game on defense. Yep. And he's begging for guys that will want to guard, that are good at it, all that stuff. And I thought that was quite a compliment to Elijah, and I totally agreed with it. It made complete sense, but he usually makes some things happen.
Man, and demeanor is probably everything for him right now because the talent's there. It's just don't get too frustrated with the hard work of this process early on. So maybe some good things are still to come from Elijah Fisher. Would love for it to be tonight in Lawrence, Kansas, as the Red Raiders hook up with the Jayhawks. We'll be back to digest it coming up on the other side for better or worse. We're back coming up dead ahead for a quick parting shot and thought as we're going to stop by maybe the most crowded trophy case on campus that has gotten even more crowded over the weekend. We'll get to that coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. Always great to be with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Appreciate you if you've subscribed so far on YouTube. Do it if you haven't yet so you never miss an episode. Before we're out of here, Chris, we had to step away from the realm of hoops because there was a big get over the weekend elsewhere on campus. Unfortunately, didn't go the way we wanted on the hoops front for Texas Tech as they fell at United Supermarkets Arena, but across campus at the Big 12 Indoor Track and Field Championships, it was all roses for the legendary Wes Kitley. I said a moment ago, arguably the most crowded trophy case on campus belongs to the Texas Tech Track and Field program, and they add another piece of big-time Big 12 hardware to the collection. It's fun to win with anybody, but just always love to see Coach Kitley get another one.
Yeah, he's a machine, man. It's he is just one of the most impressive guys because they are so consistent. and he wins championships, plural. I mean, he's won the whole thing before, and that hasn't happened around here at Texas Tech very much at all. I guess only Marcia and Wes can say that about any program where they've won the whole thing. But it's just fun because everybody loves Wes and supports him because he's all in here. He's had multiple opportunities to leave and get taken away and go do this at some SEC school or wherever it may be. But I think it's fun to see him kind of really riding high. I don't know how many more years he wants to do this, but I hope it's a lot longer. But he's got a world-class facility. He recruits to that facility, and then his kids just show off in that facility. So it was fun for him to get to host it, win a Big 12 championship at home, which is awesome. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say too is like, because you had Kenny Perry over there, you had Zach Kitley over there, Joey was over there for quite a bit. It's fun watching some of the football guys be involved in Wes's program, but I wanted to say something too about Joey, who left the basketball game on Saturday, goes over to baseball, spends some time, and then goes over to the track meet. And I'm sitting there at the basketball game, and I'm looking across, and Tom Stone's sitting over there, Greg Sands is sitting over there. It's just I don't think it's always like this at a lot of these schools where you have a lot of coaches supporting a lot of the other programs. I think, but Joey, certainly is in charge of that right now because he gets more attention and everything. But Wes is at so much stuff too, so it's just fun to kind of watch. There's so much going on your campus, and so many of these guys were at all over the place, namely your head football coach. But to wrap it up or whatever, my thought anyway, kudos to Wes, man. He deserved it. And I think he's got a heck of a chance to do some serious damage in the outdoor portion of the track and field season too. But they still get to go do national championships at the indoor as well.
Yeah, people are asking questions in West Texas about a Joey McGuire body double. I'm hearing the talk on the streets. We're not sure that one man can actually achieve these things. And this is after we just discussed, wrapping up last week, his omnipotence. So then he just goes on and I mean, he just continues to be everywhere at the same time all at once. So props to Coach McGuire and the others on the scene as well. And props to Coach Kitley, who is just West Texas through and through. And why would you want to hang it up now, man? This has got to be like easy street time in his career as compared to, days in Abilene or otherwise here in Lubbock before you have the facility and all this stuff going on. Geez, don't hand over the keys just yet because you got it like you like it, I think, right now. And obviously is doing some heavy, heavy lifting from an achievement standpoint with what he has at his disposal. Can I ask you about the name Dingle before we wrap this up, Chris? Because there was a kind of fascinating story playing out. Texas Tech football and track and field crossover here with, I believe, a freshman who is going to put on pads for Coach McGuire, but was just deciding, I suppose, to mix it up in the Big 12 indoor track and field championships and comes away with the fourth place hurdle finish. Do I have any of that near the truth?
I think he was sixth. I thought maybe, and maybe you may be right. But anyway, he finished. He made the finals either way, and I think it was an unbelievable time. I think he's just barely 18, or maybe even still 17. This is an early enrollee for your football team. I think his prospect ranking was really, really low, and that's where Joey would tell you, don't worry about the stars. You trust your process, and part of that is this kid's like 230 pounds running the hurdles this fast, and he hasn't even begun to scratch the surface. He's supposed to be still in high school, okay? And this is somebody that is one of your early enrollees that is like competing with the Big 12's best in track and field, and he's going to play football for you. So, yeah, process all of that. And this was one of your lowest rated signees. But that's what, whenever Joey and James Blanchard and those guys talk about, we signed the fastest class in the country. This is the kind of stuff that they've pointed to here, and it's bearing out in front of your eyes right now from a guy that, again, didn't get a lot of ink when you signed your class, and I think grew up a South Carolina fan and some different things there from South Carolina and all that. But I think when Tech gave him a chance to run track as well as play football, he was like, man, I'm sold. And the track component certainly sells itself with what we've talked about here with Coach Kitley and what he's got going on. But yeah, no, kid's a freak, man. I mean, to be that big, running that fast at that young of an age, he's still a baby and competing with like I said, some of the Big 12's best. And the Big 12 is really good when it comes to track and field as well.
Michael or Miguel Dingle?
Q it's Mike.
G? I don't know.
Mike. He goes by Mike. Yeah, but
fourth place finish in the final.
Okay,
if I'm reading this correctly.
Okay,
and only finished behind Red Raiders, by the way, who had let's see here, 5 of the top 6 in
Friendly
this
fire.
event. One Sooner snuck in, but
yeah,
that was kind of amazing to see because we just got done, you and I, a few weeks ago, talking about the speed they have in this class. We talked about multi-sport athletes. We talked about individually, like, is there a sport that lends itself to what they want to see here or there? You mentioned track and field, and you mentioned the hurdles. And then a few weeks later, we got this cat here who I don't even know that I knew about the early enrollee factor, but, I mean, as young as he is and relatively inexperienced, just come on out and letting it fly. I mean, that was pretty amazing to see. So that was cool. Definitely a name to keep an eye on as we get back to pad season here not too far from now. But congratulations to Coach Kitley and the Texas Tech track and field program for adding more hardware to the trophy case. Chris, enjoy hoops if it's possible in Lawrence, Kansas tonight. I'm going to enjoy visiting with you regardless. I know that already on the other side as we digest Red Raiders and Jayhawks. Thanks for the time as always, man.
Appreciate it, man. Keep hope alive, and hopefully we play well tonight. We'll see.
You got it. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. You're you, and you're wonderful just the way you are because you've chosen to spend time with Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And make sure to make Locked On College Basketball your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Chris, I'm Casey. We'll see you the next time around on Locked On Texas Tech.